Urban kiosk quakes. She's China. "12 viral videos of Chinese mayhem. War against China's lockdown. China's COVID uprising. Unbelievable meltdown. China's COVID viral chaos." That's our top focus on India First. Men and women, the elderly and the young, students and factory workers, they've taken to the streets in city after city in China. Down with Xi Jinping, down with the Chinese Communist Party. Give us freedom or give us death. These are some of the slogans that are being chanted, and the protests are spreading like wildfire. Is this China's Tiananmen Square 2.0? Larger number of security personnel are now on the streets from Shanghai to Beijing, from Chengdu to Urumqi. We will get you the latest on this huge development in China. I'm Gaurav Sawant as always. Let's get started with the headlines at 10. Police van carrying Aftab from the forensic laboratory in Delhi targeted 2 men wielding swords, chased the vehicle. The police recovered the saw used by Aftab to chop Shraddha into multiple pieces. Chilling Shraddha murder rerun in the national capital. A mother and son chop the body of the father in 22 pieces, store it in the fridge, and then dispose of the body parts every day in garbage. In poll-bound Gujarat, Prime Minister Narendra Modi accuses the opposition of being soft on terror. Congress's Mallikarjun Kharge hits back at the Prime Minister, calling him Jhootho ka Sardar. Manipal University shocker caught on camera. A professor calls a Muslim student a terrorist, gets called out by the student for Islamophobia. Centre mulls an anti-conversion law, tells the Supreme Court it is cognizant of the seriousness of forced conversions in India. The next hearing is on the 5th of December. There are reports of protests from different cities in China, from the capital Beijing to the financial center Shanghai, from Chengdu to the suspected cradle of COVID, Wuhan. Thousands of Chinese have taken to the streets across China demanding President Xi Jinping steps down. President Xi has been elected for an unprecedented third term just last month with near zero opposition. But now thousands are on the streets opposing him. Is this China's Jasmine Revolution?
Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping!
Candles, phone lights, blank sheets. A wave of Chinese civil disobedience. Probably the most extraordinary surge of defiance since the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. Public frustration boiling over in China as harsh COVID rules extend deep into their third year. Rumbling for about 5 months at isolated locations, protests against China's zero COVID policy have escalated since October the 13th. That's when banners against the country's all-powerful leader splashed across a key Beijing overpass. Remove the traitor dictator Xi Jinping, read one. Food, not PCR tests or lockdowns, read another. The chants of the Beijing protesters echoed in mass demonstrations after a fire ripped through the 15th floor of an apartment building in China. 10 people were burnt alive, apparently because emergency crews were too slow to respond because of COVID restrictions.
I think first it's because of the Xi Jinping, the president. We should end his dictatorship. This is why many people died of him. So, but now it's a good news. It's many people getting to realize the president is illegal.
For the rest of the world, it's a journey back to normal life, unmasked and hopefully more routine. For the Chinese, though, it's a life cloistered in stringent lockdowns, even if it's just a handful of cases. The government defends its brute force quarantines, restrictions and digital tracking.
What you mentioned does not reflect what actually happened. China has been following zero COVID policy and has been making adjustments based on the reality on the ground. We believe that with the leadership of the Communist Party of China, our fight against COVID-19 will be successful.
Last month, China tilted towards a one-man rule, as Xi Jinping was confirmed the country's leader for a precedent-breaking third term as the head of the ruling Communist Party. The increasing tumult over his government's COVID strategy in particular and censorship on dissent in general could be a political headache for Xi.
It is very different, still very different from 1989, because in 1989 when students are protesting, that there's clear sign that the party leadership is divided. In absolute control, we don't see any sign that some other party leaders are trying to take advantage of this to change Xi. Without the clear signal of party leaders, the divisions, and I would expect this kind of protest might not last very long.
Broader political demands for real democratic change may be too distant to realize in an authoritarian system like China's. But the scale of outpouring seems to be building pressure on Xi's government to at least loosen its draconian COVID regulations. With Ankit Kumar, Bureau Report, India Today.
The anger had been building up for some time, but the fire at a high-rise building in Urumqi, the capital of the restive Xinjiang province, opened the floodgates of protest. So from Urumqi to Shanghai to Chengdu, 10 people, including 3 children, died because firefighters, following COVID norms, could not douse the flame in time in Urumqi. The victims could not escape, as some reports seem to indicate that the building had been welded shut.
Flames spread upward from the 15th floor to the 17th floor, with smoke billowing up the 21st floor. According to multiple state media reports, the blaze took about 3 hours to extinguish. It is also said the fire trucks did not even enter the compound of the building owing to COVID lockdown rules, and hence most of the water spraying was of no use. Even though Urumqi has not seen a high number of cases, local officials fearful of losing their jobs are leaning towards more extreme measures such as sealing of buildings to prevent newer outbreaks in their jurisdictions. The region has been under lockdown for close to 3 months. Survivors say that people were not allowed to step outside of the building. In a rare case of occurrence, the Uyghurs and the Han ethnicity citizens protested together against such extended lockdowns and shouted at the authorities to lift these lockdowns. The mayor of the Urumqi municipality has reportedly apologized for the incident. Pandemic-related lockdown fatigue has increasingly triggered the people of China to protest and raise their voices against the lockdown. It remains to be seen how long this current status quo continues. In New Delhi with Sneha Murdani and Sai Kiran Kannan for India Today.
So is this Tiananmen 2.0 in China after more than 3 decades? What is the meaning of down with Xi Jinping, down with the Communist Party? As protests mount, can China target either Taiwan or India as diversionary tactics? Joining me on India First, Ainar Tanjin, advisor, Taihe Institute, and of course Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, distinguished fellow at the Center for Land Warfare Studies and former Ladakh co-commander. Mr. Tanjin, I want to begin by asking you, what do you make of these protests and slogans down with Xi Jinping, down with the Communist Party? How widespread are these protests, sir?
Well, right now we have confirmation that they are in 5 cities and that they involve numerous universities, but they're quite small in comparison. I mean, we're talking, if you add them all up, a few thousand people. There's tremendous frustration here, as your report noted, but otherwise, I think I would differ in terms of the narrative. You know, up to just recently, the central government had 90, 95 plus point in favor of it. And these were surveys conducted by Pew and Harvard University. Tremendous confidence in the government. But you know, there was this catalyst in the sense that many Chinese people saw the World Cup and they saw stadiums full of people, players hugging each other, and it seemed like it was normal. And I think this, in conjunction with this erroneous made-up story about the people being trapped in their building, that was proven false by the Western press. Somebody put a story out or a picture that showed doors wired shut. That had nothing to do with this particular area. Although there was barricades that prevented the firefighters from getting close. The government has since issued rules that that's not to be allowed anymore. Okay. So we'll have to see how that goes. But at this juncture,
General Sharma, is this okay? General Sharma, flash in the pan or something that should worry President Xi Jinping in your appreciation?
Thank you, Gaurav, for inviting me. And what is happening is unprecedented. It is remarkable. It hasn't been seen for quite some time. And in many ways that it is spread across to a large number of cities. It does imply that it is little more than even Tiananmen Square. And we have seen single incidents like the one happened in Urumqi can become catalysts for great amount of unrest. It's happened in Tunisia, led to the Arab Spring. It happened in 1915 when Archduke, and it led to the First World War, which lasted 4 to 5 years, the Great War. So all these things can happen. So what's happening is unprecedented. It's unheard of. And the propaganda that was being sold for last 3 years, and the message being told to the peoples of China that theirs was the best policy of combating COVID has actually taken its toll when you see the visuals of, as rightly pointed out, what is happening in Qatar and also everywhere else in the world where there's the countries have opened up. There seems to be a stark difference between what people in China are looking at. So that all leads to...
Absolutely. Ainar Tanjin, is Chinese President Xi Jinping wrong on his zero COVID policy? Because COVID cases are rising in different parts of the world, but nowhere do you see such a brutal lockdown as you do in China. Is this China's Jasmine Revolution or worse than Tiananmen or Tiananmen 2.0?
What an incredible bunch of nonsense. I mean, what you're saying, this idea that China's on the brink of collapse, that's a story that's been pushed out for the last 20 years. It's always been wrong. It's wrong today. Is there pressure on the Chinese government because of COVID-19 and the policy? Yes. The reason that they're having this outbreak, though, is because they were loosening up. They were allowing shorter periods for quarantines. They were allowing more foreigners in and things like this. And this has resulted in more cases. Prior to that, no one was getting in or out of China very easily, and they were keeping the cases down. But they realized they can't do that forever. China is a trading nation. So therefore, they were trying to loosen it up. They've had mixed results. They're going to continue to try to take care of it. But this narrative that...
no, forget the narrative. Tell me facts since you're there. forget, you may say you may claim it's nonsense, but when you look at these protests, students and factory workers on the streets, when you look at these protests where thousands are saying down with Xi Jinping, down with Xi Jinping.
You had 40,000 farmers, for half a year camped out. There was
but we're a democracy. We're a democracy. We're used to it. You're a dictatorship, aren't you, sir?
Democracy does not include that kind of protest, and there was, in fact, real hard action taken by the government. But let's put that aside. I mean, democracies and China are very different. China has its own version of democracy. They think it's representative. They don't have a bunch of millionaires or people who buy votes and put themselves into positions of power.
Sure, be that as it may, we are not having a discussion on democracy today. The discussion today is on China's failed COVID policy, and if it is,
you want to frame
if it is, no, I'm not arguing with you in our tangent. I'm not combative. I am just watching what's happening on television.
There's something terrible going on.
So you agree there's something terrible going on? Okay, General Sharma, there is a surge in COVID cases in several countries. There's a surge. Why is China locking up everyone? I want to understand. Why is China locking up everyone in COVID isolation centers, and I want you to see those images. Hold on. I mean, hold on in our tangent. I mean, why? Be calm, sir. If there's nothing to worry, you should celebrate.
I am calm, but this is just such utter nonsense.
You may think so. Why are you building isolation centers to lock up 90,000 people in Beijing and a couple of 100,000 in different parts of China?
There's not 90,000 people locked up in Beijing at this point.
Let me get General. I'll come to you.
There's a million people.
Okay, General Sharma, why are they building these COVID isolation centers if there's nothing to worry?
So, Gaurav, the point is it's a question of social stability. It's a method of handling the whole issue. Now, in ensuring the social stability in China, the government decided that the best way is that they would not like to have mass casualties. If we compare it with the United States, where millions have died, the Chinese statistics, as Chinese have stated, have had much lesser number of people dying. So that's a method decided that they wanted to proceed ahead.
And yet the fact of the matter is that
the fact of the matter is that you can't get society locked down for 3 years. It cannot earthly be done. So they have to actually get down to changing the mode. And I reckon that this is a warning call, and there would be a dramatic shift into the policies of the zero COVID, which has been continuing for 3 years, is now, because this has to be controlled. And we're not talking about any collapse in China. It is just that this is a warning call that you have to change the policies and get on with this mass campaign of getting the vaccines done, which has not been taken up in the same manner like even it was done in India. Is also the systemic of allowing people to go across with their economic activity. You cannot keep people boxed down
unless the Chinese vaccines haven't worked. Mr. Tangent, I want to understand from you, again, not being combative, only want to understand from you, large elderly population, vaccine that's ineffective, is that China's fear? Is that why Xi Jinping locked up everyone for 3 years? And is that why the fear is that he's been called out for being wrong?
Okay, so you mixed a couple of facts. There's a large group, 45 million who are over this septuagenarian age who have not got vaccinated because they didn't know anybody who got the COVID. I mean, there's only 5,400 deaths versus 1 million in the U.S., despite having many more, 3.5 times the population. So they consider it successful. But people will lulled into a false sense of security. They say, well, why do I need to take a vaccine? I just stay at home. I'm elderly. I just don't want to do it. And the fact is, the government wasn't tough enough. If I'd been in their position, I would have probably been more interested in mandating vaccines. And the Chinese vaccine does work. If you don't believe that it worked in China, why don't you check with the UAE and Brazil? That was the dominant one. And
absolutely. And then they got multiple American booster shots in the UAE. And be that as it may, I am not countering you. The show is not about the Chinese vaccine or whether it's effective or not. It's only about protesting China. It's only about protests in China. And why are so many people protesting? And why is your police beating up these protesters? You know, in a democracy, you don't beat up protesters.
If you look at the videos, you'll see that it's the protesters who are attacking the police. So, you know, this idea that, you know, people gather together just to have a peaceful protest, there's no problem there. This problem is when people start vandalizing property and they start attacking the police. Yes, the police are going to show
thousands running away from Foxconn facility. Thousands running away from Foxconn facility. So you may like to defend it, and I have no bone, you know, to pick with you on that.
I'm not defending it. I'm telling you what the facts are.
Sure.
Why don't you just look at the videos?
I am looking at the videos. I'm looking at 20 men in hazmat suits beating up one man, and if you don't see them, the world does. But let me bring in General, how do you see this situation pan out from here? Does Xi Jinping have reason to worry, or he's too powerful? You know, even when he locked up Hu Jintao, nobody could say anything. What is a handful or a couple of thousand of protesters?
Where do you come off with this nonsense about locking up Hu Jintao?
All right.
Oh my gosh.
The whole world saw it on television.
That's the end of this.
Okay. General, respond.
So I think if you divide it into short term and the medium term and long term, in the short term, I think there would be a change of policy in which there will be some more relaxation and some more force on getting the vaccination mandated across even to the elderly population, so that they can open out. To open out the society, vaccine is essential, and I think the Chinese government will think so. But in the long term, this protestation must be taken, and it's not this protestation of zero COVID policy which came up in Urumqi. There were other protestations that's been happening in smaller scale in all parts of China over a period of time. This all adds up to some kind of a larger anxiety, and you know, in longer term, this may be a tinderbox. It must be something that the government is sitting on, and it needs to be addressed in that forum. So, you know, short term they may be able to address it, but long term there may be a pent up anger in the society which needs to be vent out at one time.
To deal
and
with
that
this,
needs to be addressed.
Okay, to deal with this, so you know, are they letting people let off some steam through these protests? But look at these quarantine centers that are being built in various cities. What does that mean? Does China know something that we don't? Would there be another huge wave and lots of fatalities across the world, and China will have its quarantine centers ready? Point 2. Point 3, as diversionary tactics, could China then try to attack either Taiwan or try and give us grief along the line of actual control?
Are you asking me, Gaurav?
Yes, General.
Yeah, so Gaurav, I think this is getting a thing a little too far, and wars are messy affairs. Wars are not handled in this manner just to settle. China is the second largest economy. China is the largest exporting nation in the world. Its economies are so tied up, and it isn't probably ready presently and for quite some time to take on either Taiwan's capture or come on to the line of actual control. So I would not like to exaggerate the issue of threat across to either Taiwan or on China, even to get the attention diverted. I think that is putting issues too far.
Okay.
Presently, the internal situation, including the economy, is in dire straits, and the demography is gone down, and those issues need to be addressed in China, like every other country has issues. And, you know, we should not get across to say that they will divert attention and come across to either us or towards Taiwan.
Fair enough. But the fear of quarantine camps, not COVID-19 pandemic that's shutting down China. It's the fear of these multiple camps that are coming up. Look at the camp that's being set up in Guangzhou. Makeshift hospitals, quarantine centers that can accommodate not one, not two, not 100, not 1,000, 250,000 people. But those locked up are treated in the most inhuman condition. We bring you this report.
Once in the news for building hospitals for COVID-19 at breakneck speed, a record 8 days in the year 2020. China is now in the news for these quarantine centers and makeshift camps. No, we are not in 2020, and the novel coronavirus is not novel anymore. As the world has moved on, learned to live with the virus and work its way around it, China is stuck in time. China is infamous for being the host country to the novel coronavirus and the worst for hiding the truth from the world, even misleading the WHO and blaming other countries for the outbreak. If you think the COVID crackdown measures are brutal, then what do you feel about this? These people locked up in quarantine camps being treated worse than prisoners. Toilets are being used as quarantine centers, inhuman living conditions in quarantine camps. Children isolated from their parents. The risk of infection continues to be low in the capital city of Beijing. However, makeshift camps are coming up here as well. The Chinese people continue to suffer. They are made to pay for their stay in these quarantine camps as the government monitors health status digitally through COVID passports. In New Delhi with Sneha Mardani for India Today.
Tension is rising in surveillance state China, and we will continue to track developments on that story very closely. I'd like to thank our guests Inar Tangent and Janil Sharma for joining me here on this India First special.